now. Roughly how long would you like the talk to go? Okay. That's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. And then we'll take, after that, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes break, and then Geshe-la will give a talk. Is that the plan? Okay. Just let me know when you would like us to start, Robbie. We start now? Okay. Oh, cha-cha, I didn't know. Good. All right, well, let's begin formally then. But rather than chanting, which is always very good, but there's also a time for silence. And so what I'd like to do is start with just a few minutes of just quiet meditation, as we've already been doing, but now move it more into an active mode to really the core of entering the Buddhist path, which is entrusting ourselves. We have this formal phrase, taking refuge. But the meaning, of course, is simply placing our trust. As we look to the Buddha, to the Dhamma, to the Sangha, if there arises a deep sense of trust, that's my favorite word for it, what refuge really is. Entrusting our well-being in the pursuit of genuine happiness in this lifetime, eradicating the sources of suffering in this lifetime, but also looking beyond death, to our well-being in future lifetimes, and who can guide us there? Many people can help us find happiness and alleviate suffering in this lifetime, and it's good. Many people bring different skills, different backgrounds, not only Buddhist. When it comes to future lifetimes, having another fortunate rebirth to be able to continue our practice, to the Buddha. And then we look beyond that, beyond simply taking another favorable rebirth, which we have now. How do we go further along the path? To actually cutting at the very root, the nature of suffering, the sources of suffering, to find true liberation. Who can guide us there? Clearly only a person who's realized it, him or herself. And then we think of the enlightenment of the Buddha himself. Who is best equipped, most capable to lead other sentient beings to liberation, to awakening? And there's really only one individual, one type of individual. And that's the Buddhas. They are perfectly awakened. And so in this regard, then, we take refuge. We entrust ourselves for our cultivation of genuine well-being and happiness in this lifetime, to find future favorable rebirth in the future, to find liberation, to find perfect enlightenment of a Buddha. In that regard, we take refuge. So let's begin there. I'll just front-load this meditation. So we begin with refuge, but rather than simply reciting this time, let's go inside and do it from inside out. And then secondly, why are we here? Why have we come on pilgrimage? Why are we here in this holy spot? And that is to achieve, if we take the aspiration of aspirations, the most noble of all aspirations, bodhicitta, that enlightenment is not only for someone else that we worship, that we follow, but our great challenge, our highest aspiration, is to achieve the enlightenment of a Buddha ourselves in order to be of greater service to others, to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings. So in quiet then, for a few minutes, in our own way, with our own thoughts, our own aspirations, our own images, let's take refuge and cultivate bodhicitta as our motivation for being here and for listening to the teaching that will come afterwards. So let's have a few minutes. Oh, lasso. Well, this is a very special time, a very special place. As I feel like my body and mind are both drinking this place of blessing, with the sounds of the birds, the sweetness of the air, the sounds of others coming here to worship, to pray, to meditate, to show their devotion to the Buddha. I think this, at least for the time being, may be as close as we get to being in the Pure Land, right here and now. And if we view it with pure vision, that's our choice. If we choose to view this, then this really can be a pure land right now. That's up to us, not to the geography or the land. So I've been asked to speak this morning about the relationship between samadhi, or the methods for developing shamatha, of samadhi, namely shamatha, and enlightenment itself. And so I have nothing new to offer. The Buddha Dharma has been flourishing for a very long time. The Buddha spoke at great and on many occasions about the significance of samadhi within the three meanings, the higher ethics, the benevolence, the higher training in wisdom. The Buddha spoke, one can say that's all he spoke about, that is in terms of the path. And so I have nothing new to offer, but I perhaps can shed a contemporary light on the teachings of the Buddha, some of the great adepts following him. But for this morning I'd really like to focus principally on the Buddha's own words and on his teachings as recorded primarily in the Pali Canon, which are accepted by all schools of Buddhism, but also, since I'm following the Mahayana path myself, then I cannot ignore that too. And so let's go back, since we are on this ground where the Buddha was, let's go back, if we can imagine, to his time, living a very comfortable life for all of us here, relative to many people we've seen over the last few days. All of us were living like princes and princesses in terms of the degree of comfort, of affluence and so forth that we enjoy and easily take for granted. Well, he had something similar. He was young, he was handsome, he had a lovely wife, a healthy baby, floating prospects of mobility. He was the crown prince. And I'm sure he would have made a very good king. And so if we think of Gautama, Prince Gautama, as a doer, if he were simply a doer, he could have been a very great king and stayed at home and been a spectacular king. I think there's really no question of that. He was a doer, but he was not only a doer, and he found a sense of dissatisfaction, some deep insight into the nature of dukkha, a dissatisfaction of suffering. And so when he set out in a way that looked quite dramatic, one could even say questionable, leaving behind his wife and his very young son, leaving behind all those who loved him, his family, leave them beyond, and setting off on his own, one can wonder, how can you rationalize that? How is that justified? And everything comes to motivation. The answer has to be motivation. Not his intensity, not how long he practiced, not the degree of his samadhi. Is that a justified act or not? It really comes down to motivation. Safety, speculation. That when he made that great sacrifice for himself, but also for all of those who loved him, and all of the people in that, they're looking to him with great hope. A good king. Temporarily he let them all down. If he was for his own sake, one might say, well, that's a bit self-centered. But I think we have that his stepping out was not simply for all sentient beings. We know, but I'll give a very brief recounting of what occurred thereafter. He, being a highly educated, having excellent education as a crown prince, he would be getting the best of education available, including in the Vedas and the religion of the time. So the first thing he did, as he made this great step to live the life of a homeless one, voluntarily going from the state of being a crown prince to being a beggar, the generosity of other people. That's going from the top to the bottom, you know. But the very first thing he did, since he wasn't simply escaping from what he was searching for, intelligent person, well, who has the best, how do you say, program, the best strategy, what's most promising of the spiritual paths that were well explored at that time. It was clearly they were doing many things. There was asceticism, there were propriety, many schools of very plural out there, basically saying, I lead you. But the two that he sought out, first one and then another, were great samadhi masters of jhana, developing very high degree of samadhi attention, where withdraws the attention from this sensory domain, withdraws it into the form realm, and even beyond that into the formless realm. And as all of you know who've studied this life, very rapidly achieve extraordinary state of samadhi, way high in the formless realm, deep abstraction, withdrawal from everything we know of the world, to a point where this is it, this is so good, this is so serene, this is a peace that surpasseth understanding, as we say in English. This must be it, this must be what we have been looking for, moksha, liberation. And so, to his great credit, this teacher, when he saw young Gautama achieving his level of samadhi so quickly, one could imagine he might have felt a lot of jealousy. It might have taken him many years, and here's this upstart achieving it, who knows, in maybe an amount of weeks. But there was no jealousy, but only delight as a good and any excellent teacher of anything. If you find a student who is exceptionally gifted and matches you very quickly, any excellent teacher of anything, whether it's dentistry, whether it's art or music, you're going to take delight, right? If there's no ego involved. Well, he did. And so he invited young Gautama, sit together with me. We shall lead others to the path of moksha. Congratulations. But Gautama was exceptional, not only in the speed with which he achieved samadhi, but his sensitivity, or the word I like, perspicacity, his clarity of insight, the subtlety of his awareness, to see that, no, in fact, this was not moksha. This was not liberation. This was nothing irreversible. So the thought must have come to mind, is there any higher state of samadhi? And yes, more. So he sought him out, became his student, state of samadhi, within what we call samsara, the peak of samsara. Neither perception nor non-perception. Again, in the same way, he matched his own teacher's achievement of samadhi. Once again, the teacher was delighted. Once again, the teacher said, congratulations, you've achieved moksha. Teach with me. Teach with me. We'll be partners now. And once again, Gautama saw, as blissful, serene, as transcendent as the state of samadhi was while he's dwelling in, when he comes out of samadhi, re-engages with this rough and tumble world. People, unpleasant people, very people, good days and bad days. He saw that there had been no irreversible change. That was not liberation. That was a very nice samadhi escape. But you keep on coming back, like a yo-yo that goes out but always comes back to the palm. He had not found the liberation he was seeking. So I would imagine, again, I'm not really speculating much, with great respect, he withdrew and he said, this is good, isn't moksha. For the next 6 years then, austerities that almost defy the imagination, of fasting, of yogic exercises, of breathing exercises. He really ran through the technology of that era. Trying, he was an experimenter. He was not satisfied with the science of liberation that was available already, otherwise he would have simply become somebody else's follower. But when all was said and done, after 6 years, and this is 6 years away from his family, they're missing him. His son has grown into from a baby to a young boy, right? They're missing him. 6 years has gone by, and he looked at his body, and his body was so depleted, so emaciated, so weak, that he recognized something that we all recognize too. And that is, as long as we are embodied, the mind is arising in empowered by the body, but also limited. And he saw he limited his mind. kind of hit the bottom. And then a young woman came, saw him in the situation. I'm so glad it was a woman. She came to his rescue. I know as a man, we often need women to come to our rescue. And he turned out to be no exception. And she offered nice, pure, wholesome, nourishing food. He restored his health, which he knew he needed to do, with her aid. Disenchanting his former companions, his 5 companions, who are all brothers in arms, joining in the ascetic and so forth. As they were concerned, as soon as Gautama, their chief, their hero, as soon as he started to take food, ordinary food, then they thought, okay, he's gone soft. He's given up. So they basically shunned him. They turned away. He said, well, we're not giving up. And they continued marching along as they were before and figured, well, Gautama, he was a prince, what do you expect? He's gone back to the soft life. But he knew that was not the case at all. But now it's interesting, I think, to imagine. We can't, but we can try. What would it be like to be Gautama now 35 years old and look, okay, what do you have to show for your 6 years of absolute devotion with incredible intensity that just struck awe in the people around him? Boy, I'd never seen an ascetic like that before. But now what does he have to show? After 6 years, away from his family, away from all the comforts, away from doing good works in the world as a prince, because he could have done a lot. He hasn't done anything. He's been, if I may say so, useless to other people for the time being. Because he's focusing on the purification, the liberation of his own mind. And what does he have to show? He had good health, he lost his health, and now he has good health again. But that's just going around in a circle. So I think he had pretty much run the gamut, that is, explored the range of options. I think he was quite thorough for what was available at that time. And I'm imagining a bit of drama. He now, if we try to put ourselves in his place, he's thinking, what else might there be? I tried the samadhi route, samadhi as the route to liberation, samadhi alone, not enough. I tried all these ascetic practices, the pranayama and so forth and so on, not enough, none of them liberated. And all I got was ruining my health. So okay, I found a middle way, not too luxurious, not too ascetic. So he's found a middle way, good, but what does he really have to show? He has to think of something he hasn't tried. And so as he's raising this question, I mean, it must have been an overwhelming question for him. What now? What now? He could give up. He could just go back, tail under his legs, and say, sorry, dear, but it didn't work out, but I'm ready to be prince again, but that never came up. And so, little gift from a bird. Thank you, that's nice. Fertilizing the teaching. This is the question. What now? And then a memory came up. And this is where he recalled the time when he was a child. It was in the springtime. His father, as the king, was out doing a ritual plowing. It must have been a ceremony, because he's a king, not a farmer. And young Prince Gautama was off duty. He was not part of the ceremony. And so he's sitting quietly under a rose apple tree, just sitting quietly. And being who he was, having had an enormous amount of momentum from past lives, this young boy, just sitting quietly, he spontaneously slipped into a state of samadhi known as the first jhana. The first jhana. And I will read now the Buddha's own words. So I thought back and forth, and I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree. Desires disengaged from unwholesome things. So his attention had withdrawn from all of the attractions of the 5 sensory fields, also all the attractions of our imagination, memories and so forth, walking down, memory lane and so forth, withdrawn from the whole desire realm, specifically of the sensual realm, but also would disengage from all unwholesome things. So his mind went into a very ethically pure state. I entered upon and abode in the first jhana. There are 4 jhanas. The first one is the initial one. But he characterizes it. He's now recalling what he experienced as a boy. This first jhana, which now he knows to be the first jhana, which is accompanied by coarse and precise investigation. We'll return to this, but this means when you're dwelling not in the most subtle state of samadhi, because the second samadhi, the second jhana is more subtle than the first, the third is more subtle, the fourth is more subtle, then you can go into the formless realm and that's more subtle yet. Not so subtle that you can't engage your intelligence to really investigate, to explore, to penetrate. In other words, you can practice vipassana. You have to do so, but you can. If you go deeper into samadhi, the second jhana, then those two, they're called dhyana factors, of coarse and subtle investigation. The mind has gone so subtle that that can't be. You're going into a state that's blissful, that's very a sense of well-being, that's very single-pointed in the second jhana, but not the coarse and subtle investigation. So he entered spontaneously into the first jhana, imbued with coarse and precise investigation. Sometimes it's called applied and sustained thought, and again we'll get it later, with well-being and bliss born of seclusion. Now this is very precise. He's not speaking casually here. He's identifying what are called the jhana factors, the factors that spontaneously emerge from your own mind stream when you achieve the first jhana. And there are 5 of them. So in that first jhana, 5, it's coarse investigation, subtle analysis, a sense of well-being, a sense of bliss or real joy. It's got a real edge to it, like ecstasy, and then single-pointedness of attention. Those are the 5. And so he had achieved all of these. Coarse and precise investigation with well-being and bliss, born of seclusion, that is, your mind utterly withdrawn from all the titillation, the excitement, the arousal from the sensory fields. And you experience this. It's a state of extraordinary equilibrium. You're not zoned out, but there's this wonderful sense of equilibrium. And again, I will return to this. But equilibrium, where the mind is supple, it's clear, it's stable, it's silent, but if you wish to activate it, to invest, you have that ability. In other words, you have the joy, the serenity, the bliss, the single-pointedness of samadhi, but you also have full access to your intelligence, your ability to investigate, to analysis, what turns out to be the ability to engage in vipassana, insight. So he recalled this as he's sitting there at the age of 35, wondering, what now? Where shall I go now? Because his passion, his yearning, his dedication to liberation is in no way subsided. And he knows a whole bunch of ways that don't work. But what might work? And he thought back to his childhood experience, which was spontaneous. And so he remembered that vividly, what it was like. Not the highest state of samadhi, not even close to the state of samadhi his first samadhi teacher taught him. Much coarser than that, let alone the second one. But he recalled that, and then he said, the thought arose, might that be the way to enlightenment? Might that be the key? That first jhana. The question arose in his mind, and since it was the Buddha's mind, in whom that question arose, an answer came back. Then following that memory, there came the recognition that this was enlightenment. So that is very clear. Again, you're not getting any interpretation from me. You need nothing from me. The Buddha was so clear, so unequivocal, that we don't really need to interpret. He said that. This was the key. So it was almost like on the road of you have the first jhana, second, third, and fourth, all the way, and his jhana, the second, the third, the fourth, right in the realm, they just zoomed right? But then he recalls, jhana. That's drawing, putting you in where you can the nature of reality but have the benefits of samadhi at the same time. Might that be the way came? Yes, it is. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha makes this statement about what our minds are like. The wise one straightens, which is difficult to guard and hard to restrain, just as a fletcher straightens an arrow shaft. Like a fish that has been out of its watery abode and thrown, this mind flutters and trembles when it is removed from the abode of Mara. Now, a little bit of interpretation here. The abode of Mara is not a bad place, like a bad neighborhood or something like that. The abode of Mara is where we're living, an environment, a way of life, companions and so forth, that stimulate the mind, that feed our addiction for stimulation, feed our addiction to doing, feed our addiction to all motion. In motion. One of the synonyms of sentient being, one who is not enlightened, which means one who's in motion. One who's in motion. But now what happens when we, whether it's from the life of a prince or from our home and our families and our occupations and the society that we're all familiar with, what happens to us? We've done it. What's it like? It's for a while, 8 weeks or a weekend or a week or a year. What happens? What's it feel like when we withdraw into simplicity, withdraw into quiet, into inactivity? We're simply sitting in a room with no stimulation. And we stay there. We don't dunk in for 5 minutes. We stay there for a day, for a weekend, for a week, 8 weeks, a year or longer. What happens to the mind? When suddenly, like a drug addict, it falls. Isn't it? Like a fish on dry land. When we're just entertainment and work and activity and keeping ourselves busy, everything seems normal. We're a fish in our element. But then take us out of that element into solitude, in simplicity, where there's nothing there that's stimulating, arousing. We just have our own minds to deal with. Well, the fish flopping on the dry land sounds like a pretty good analogy to me, and that was the Buddha's analogy. So what to do about that? We can all appear pretty sane, at least most of us. Not all of us, but most of us can do a good imitation of sanity when we're living in an insane world. When we're living in a world that's frenetic, that's following after one desire after another, consumption and consumption and consumption, acquisition and consumption. When we're going with the school of fish, we look pretty normal. We look pretty sane. We're coping well. But when we go into solitude, then we have no mediation between ourselves and our minds. Entertainment, work, conversation, social interactions, keeping busy, that provides with wonderful mediation to conceal from us how ill, how dysfunctional, how imbalanced, and then frankly how crazy our minds really are. Go into solitude and simplicity, and you see, and that may want you to reboot and consider another lifestyle, where we are sane, we are sound, we are balanced from our core. We are actually sane and not simply doing a good imitation. That's good enough that we don't draw attention to ourselves from other people thinking, you're really weird. And so, among the many techniques, I should finish the story. So that thought occurred to the Buddhist mind. Yes, that is the way to enlightenment. He had this certainty. He said recognition. It was not a hunch. There was some kind of a certainty that came up into his mind stream. He re-achieved the first jhana. He achieved a long time ago, but he lost it. With all that emaciation, all the austerities and so forth, he went back, but now went back to achieve the first jhana. After some work, not a whole lot, but some work, he achieved the first jhana again. And then there arose a kind of confidence that I suspect was unprecedented. Again, it's my interpretation, but I think it's pretty safe. A type of confidence that was unprecedented. Might that be the way to enlightenment? Yes, it is. Not maybe, 75, 25%. No, that's it. And then he achieved it. And now he achieves it. He knows the taste of these 5 jhana factors. He knows what it's like for the mind to be free of the 5 obscurations, which I'll get to later. He has a new platform. He has his lab. And the lab is in his mind, and the lab is it's a good lab. And so then another confidence arose. I try to imagine it, and my imagination is not good enough. But I can imagine imagining it. Another confidence arose. I'm ready. And he came to this tree. or the ancestor of this tree, he sat down, and as you may know, he sat down with an extraordinary resolve. Extraordinary resolve. I'm not getting up. I'm not moving from here until I have achieved what I set out to do in the first place. I'm not moving until I've achieved liberation. Who of us would have that kind of confidence? Go into retreat and say, I'm not coming out until I've achieved enlightenment. Well, he did. And then he sat here with that resolve, enormous confidence. Enormous confidence. And I don't quote here, but I will then paraphrase. On that night of his enlightenment, then, he abode in the first jhana. He in fact practiced anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. That was the method he used. He said so. He practiced mindfulness of breathing on the night of his enlightenment. He practiced mindfulness of breathing on the day of his parinirvana. So mindfulness of breathing is not just a beginner's technique. He practiced mindfulness of breathing. And he said in the first watch of his night, again I'm paraphrasing now, but I'll paraphrase pretty closely. On the first watch of the night, I think that's the first 4-hour period, he said, I saw with direct knowledge. There's no speculation here. It's not belief, it's not hunch, it's not anything besides. I saw with direct knowledge my own past lifetimes. Countless past lifetimes. I saw it for myself. I was this, and he saw the situation in each lifetime, and the further he would direct his mind backward, it just all become evident. Unimpeded vision. And he said, I know this, I saw with direct knowledge. The second watch of the night, he turned his attention outwards to the world of sentient beings, and for each one now, his understanding, as he's venturing into deeper shamatha vipassana, and stream of others. And once again, that which he attended to became evident to him, and myriad sentient beings, he could see their past lives, and the connection, that they're not just random, causality to the next, one life to the next, interactions, the pratityasamutpana, sentient beings interacting with each other. And on the third watch of the night, then the 12 links of dependent origination, the whole mechanics of samsara. How does samsara emerge? How it was withdrawn? Here is the way to liberation. It all became completely transparent before him. He saw it all. He saw the truth. Saw the Four Noble Truths, and his mind was utterly purified as he made his final encounter with all the maras that rose up him to take him away. He responded with serenity and loving kindness. No battle. War against the Buddha, wisdom and compassion, and then he achieved enlightenment. So that samadhi, that first jhana, that key of samadhi, what was the nature? What's the nature of that? As I mentioned before, the particular samadhi practice that he was engaging in was anapanasati. He samatha method as well as the vipassana method. The approach you take, it can be simply for the sake of the method and develop it, as he described in his great discourse on mindfulness of in and out breathing. It turns into vipassana practice. Everything can actually take you all the way to liberation. Phases. The verse 4 are all about samadhi. 12 are about vipassana. Look, what did the Buddha have to say about this particular method? This mindfulness of breathing, which is that we find in all contemplative schools. You find it in Zen, in Chan, very strongly emphasized in the more than any other. But in Indian Mahayana Buddhism, we find it in Buddhism, in all schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and you find it in the Shravakayana, the foundational teachings, you find it in the Mahayana, you even find it in the Vajrayana. Mindfulness of breathing is taught there as well. And so what about this? What did the Buddha have to say? Why is he doing this so much? And among the dozens of methods that Buddha taught for practicing samadhi, this was the one technique. The other that he emphasized very strongly, and he specifically emphasized for people living in India, quiet, rural India with maybe maybe 5% of the population of India nowadays, had nothing remotely like the population it has now. This was the method that the Buddha selected and encouraged for people who are very strong in vikalpa. Vikalpa, Sanskrit term. Vikalpa means this obsessive, compulsive flow of ideation, the mind that won't stop talking. We call it rumination. We call it just this ongoing flow of chit-chat, of commentary, where at times we may, if you go into retreat, you may feel a little bit where you want to talk to your mind and say, would you please shut up? I don't need to listen to you all the time. You don't. Please stop this obsessive, delusional flow of thinking and let me have a little peace. Well, there were people living at the time of the Buddha, 2,600 years ago, and it was a matter of temperament. Some were more inclined to that, others to anger, others to lust, others to pride, and so on. There were those who really, this was their hang-up. This was a major imbalance or challenge they had to deal with, and for such people had a strong predisposition for vikalpa, which we all know so well. He said, for you people, there's only one shamatha method that I encourage, and that is mindfulness of breathing. Since our time is short, I won't elaborate on all the reasons for that, but I think this is advice that has been handed down through the centuries and centuries later in Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, and so forth. They're making the same statement. That for those of you who are really subject to this obsessive, compulsive flow of thinking, ideation, mindful breathing is to really be what the doctor ordered, the great physician, the doctor ordered. Right? If there were individuals 2,500 years ago who had this particular predisposition, while clearly others did not, they weren't all the same, and this is rural India, or let's say nomadic Tibet 800 years ago, if we consider our lifestyles now, in modernity, in living in cities or suburbs and so forth, then I think it's probably a fair speculation to say that for us who are just normal in modern society, we fit into that category. It's just the nature of the beast. We know what it's like living in modernity, so you need no commentary from me. So if this was appropriate for people then, some individuals with this particular type of predisposition, my strong speculation or idea is probably suitable for all of us now. Given the lifestyle, the information flow, the multitasking, the addiction to stimulation, unlike even 100 years ago. You know, it's not even similar to that, let alone 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. We're running a weird experiment on humanity right now. Can we even survive with this amount of input, data, stimulation, work, entertainment, and so forth? You know, how many times are we checking the cell phone each day, you know, for our email and so on? Well, they came along, just a couple of decades ago. And so the Buddha said of this method, mindfulness of breathing, he gave a beautiful analogy. It's as true, as sound as it was when he first gave it. He says, just as in the last month of the hot season. So the hot season is just before monsoon begins. So any of you who've lived here, you know it's about mid-June, at least where I've lived in India, mid-June. The really hot time, the hottest time is in late April, May, early June. Sweltering hot. And the air quality is terrible. Even back then, it wasn't smog, but still the dust and the grime of just intensive heat, a lot of dryness, so it's very muggy, very unpleasant. So the Buddha said in the last month of the hot season, that's as hot as it gets before you have a bit of a respite from the monsoon. It gets clear, the air is fresher, it's cooler, it's moist, so it kind of nice, the monsoon. But this is before the niceness begins. And it's long after the coolness, the pleasantness of the winter on the Gangetic Plain. He said, just as in the last month of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, so the air quality really grimy, even back in India back then, in such a situation, imagine a great rain cloud out of season. That is, it's not monsoon yet, but suddenly there's a great rain cloud anyway. A great rain cloud out of season disperses it and quells it on the spot. That is, all that dust and dirt in the air, all the air contamination, the cloudburst takes place, the water's drenching the sky, and you know how quickly it is, that the air quality is suddenly fresh and it's clear. How quick that is, yeah? So he gives this as an analogy. He said, so too concentration by mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati samadhi, the unification of the mind by way of mindfulness of breathing, as the technique, when developed and cultivated. So that's again a loaded term. Don't expect it to be overnight results. It's not a candy machine. You put in your dollar and you get, just get it right out. When cultivated and developed, what's the benefit? What's the consequence? It is peaceful, sublime, an ambrosial dwelling, and it disperses and quells on the spot unwholesome states whenever they arise. It quells and disperses on the spot these unwholesome states, which he parallels or shows the analogy to all that dust and grime in the air. Develop and cultivate this mindfulness of breathing, and you enter into a state where the quality of your mind is like that, the air, the sky, right after the cloudburst. Crystal clear, fresh, moist, sparkling. And when you're abiding in that state, which is quite remarkable. I mean, I find this enormously rich with meaning, pregnant with meaning, because he's not attending to something pleasant. He's attending to the sensations of the breath, which are not unpleasant, but they're not particularly pleasant either. But he says it's peaceful. Well, that makes sense. If you're not attending to things, to people, places, objects, and so forth that arouse desire, craving, yearning and longing, that agitates the mind, and you're not attending to unpleasant things and activities and memories and so forth that agitate the mind with anger and aversion, you're attending to a flow of stimulation, very mild, which doesn't arouse any mental affliction. Neither craving nor hostility, neither pride nor jealousy. It's neutral. But it's not a pleasant stimulation. It's not a blissful stimulation. We all know what it's like to feel the sensations of the breath. But focusing on this neutral object, and while attending to that, neutral in the sense it's not arousing either aversion or attachment, attending to that, and what the real transformation that's taking place here is the mind is becoming balanced, it's becoming relaxed, it's becoming calm, stable, clear, and out of this mind that is settling in a state of equilibrium, a sense of serenity arises. That makes really good sense. That one could predict. If you're not attending to things and getting caught up in things that agitate the mind, then your mind becomes peaceful. Got it. I could figure that out without ever meditating. See, yep, that would be a good logical inference. That makes sense. So if you want to be peaceful, quit attending to things that disturb the mind. That makes sense. But this next one, he says it's peaceful, but beyond, he says sublime. Where on earth does sublime come from? Sublime is a very lofty adjective. What's sublime about this? The sensations of the breath? The respiration? It's just breathing. What's sublime is the mind. A quality of sublimity arises from the mind stream when the mind is balanced. And then he speaks of it as an ambrosial dwelling. So this is getting loftier and loftier characterization here. You're abiding in ambrosial dwelling. Something that is blissful, something that's sweet, ambrosial. But all by attending to a neutral object. So you can't say, oh, my breathing was going so well. It's the mind that is being refined and balanced by attending to a neutral object. And your mind becomes sublime. Your mind becomes an ambrosial dwelling. Your mind becomes a very nice neighborhood to hang out in. Right? But then he says something even more remarkable. That it's not just dopamine levels. You can get that with a drug. We have lots of drugs for that, legal and illegal. To enter into a state where you're peaceful, sublime, you say, this is really ambrosial. Some of the drugs like heroin, I've been told, I've never taken, I'm not curious, but apparently it's very, very nice. If you're on a heroin high, I think a lot of people would come out and say, that was ambrosial. That was something spectacular. And it's chemicals. There's no ethics, there's no wisdom, there's no samadhi, it's just chemicals. And so, in a way, big deal. If you can get it from drugs, then how meaningful is it? But it's not just that. He says that evil and unwholesome states of mind, when you're abiding in this state, they're dispelled in an instant. And I've never heard that said of heroin. Go on a drug high, whether it's ecstasy or heroin or morphine or whatever, opium, and say, it made me such a more virtuous person. Who's ever come up with that one? Where's the drug that makes you virtuous? Where's the drug that if some tendency for craving or hostility or arrogance or jealousy comes up, the drug take care of it for you? I've never heard of one. It's not to say they'll never develop it in the future, but not yet. But this has no side effects, except you start really liking meditation a lot. And so I find this enormously significant, that it's not only a sense of well-being, of sukha, sat sukha it's called in Sanskrit. Sat Sukha, sublime well-being. It's not just dopamine, it's not just serotonin, it's not just really a matter of brain chemistry. Something deeper is taking place here, and it will influence the brain for sure. Is this influencing your dopamine levels? It has to, how could it not? But is it because the dopamine they're entering into this? No. Chemicals will adjust your dopamine levels. Meditation will adjust your mind, and that will influence the brain from a deeper plane. This has no side effects, but it has the side effect of, the beneficial side effect, of not only making the mind malleable and clear and stable and calm, abiding in a state of equilibrium, but also there's this ethical component to it. It's virtuous, it's wholesome. And he just described what happens when you achieve the first jhana. So this is how he described. Now this is in the Pali Canon. This is the foundational schools of Buddhism. Thank you, Isaac. And some followers of Mahayana, for example, Tibetan, I've heard this, so I have to respond. That Anapanasati for Theravada. That's for Hinayana people, you know. But we Mahayanas, we have much better practices than that. We have Mahayana practices; they're much better. Leave that to the Hindus and leave that to the Theravadins, you know, those people following their own individual liberation. But we Mahayana people, we're above that. I've heard that. What are you just focusing on your breath for? You could be visualizing Buddha. What are you focusing on? You could be reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. What are you doing that? Why? You could be reciting the Heart Sutra. What are you following your breath for? You're wasting your time. That's what Hinayana people do. Well, they got that one wrong. They haven't read the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And so here we read directly from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 10,000 stanzas. The Buddha is addressing one of his two principal disciples, Shariputra. And he makes this statement: Shariputra, take the analogy of a potter or a potter's apprentice's wheel. Pali Canon analogy, clearly showing this Theravada or Shravakaya, the pursuit of their own liberation. This is for those also having aspiration to achieve perfect enlightenment. Take the analogy of a potter or a potter's apprentice spinning the potter's wheel. If he makes a long, he knows it is long. If he makes a short revolution, he knows it is short. Shariputra, similarly, a bodhisattva, a great being or a mahasattva, mindfully breathes in and mindfully breathes out. If the inhalation is long, he knows the inhalation is long. If the exhalation is long, he knows the exhalation is long. If the inhalation is short, he knows the inhalation is short. If the exhalation is short, he knows the exhalation is short. It's exactly the same teaching the Buddha gives in the Pali context for bodhisattvas. Shariputra, thus a bodhisattva, a great being, by dwelling with introspection and mindfulness, eliminates and disappointment towards the world by means of non-objectification, and he lives observing the body as the body internally. It's a very rich, very full statement. Dwelling with introspection and mindfulness. As the Buddha defined these terms, as he used these terms, this term samprajanya in Sanskrit, introspection, is our ability, our mind, to monitor our own bodies, your breathing, monitor if we're speaking, monitor the speech. The speech right now, is it appropriate? Is it too much, too little, too fast? The content helpful, not helpful? I have to be monitoring that, otherwise I shouldn't be teaching. But also monitoring the mind. Is the mind right now, is it clear, is it dull? Virtuous or unvirtuous? How's the mind doing? And that's the faculty that we already have, but extraordinarily, with tremendous promise. This is a faculty that we know from 2,500 years of Buddhism and centuries before that, of the contemplative heritage of classical India. This faculty can be refined. It can be enhanced, developed to extraordinary levels. And the levels that frankly are, I have to say in all bluntness, beyond the scope of imagination of modern psychology. It's just not a strength of modern psychology. It has its other strengths, but this is not a strength. But it is a strength from the time of the Buddha, of recognizing the ability to monitor the mind and enhancing that, making it rigorous, sophisticated, precise, penetrating. Absolutely crucial. And mindfulness, as the Buddha used the term, this sati, the so-called sati, it's much, much more than simply being mindful moment to moment, which is very good. But that's actually not the Buddha's meaning of sati. It never was. Sati is bearing in mind when we attend to something we choose to attend to, such as the sensations of the breath, or reflecting upon the nature of impermanence, or cultivating loving kindness, or practicing generosity. We bring something to mind. Maybe it's an insight, maybe it's a quality like loving kindness, and then we sustain it. We bear it in mind, we cherish it, we nurture it, we sustain it without forgetfulness and without distraction. That's sati, that's mindfulness. So it includes moment-to-moment awareness of whatever comes up. That's very good. But that's like 1% of the pie. One fraction. Very good fraction. But if one equates mindfulness with that, you've missed 99% of the pie. Right? And so this combination of samprajanya, introspection, and smriti is called in Sanskrit, mindfulness, these two. Cultivating these, this is the royal path to achieving shamatha. You take those while practicing shamatha, and you then apply them in the practice of vipassana. This is why this smrityupasthana, or more commonly known in the Pali, satipatthana, the 4 applications of mindfulness, applications of mindfulness. You cultivate your mindfulness and introspection through the practice of shamatha. This is your technology. This is refining, utilizing and refining these faculties of the mind we already have, but which tend to be in a crude and undeveloped mode. Before we really learn how to train the mind, we learn how to train the mind optimally up to the first jhana. Go beyond if you like, if you have some spare time. But refine them, cultivate them, for example, through mindfulness of breathing. You use them, and you closely apply your mindfulness to the body, to feelings, mind at large. That brings you deep into the territory of vipassana. Right? And so the Buddha said, the great being, by dwelling with introspection and mindfulness, cultivating, sustaining these, then eliminates attachment. Now, attachment specifically here to all of our craving, our longing, our desires, our attachment to all the bounties of samsara. And the only bounties of samsara that we're clearly aware of right now are what are called the bounties of the desire realm, which we can pick up with the 5 senses, with the 6th sense, also with imagination and so forth. But all the attractions, all the things that set us into motion, this will make me happy, he or she or that place or this, that, and set, that will make me happy. And we start scurrying along in samsara, and then cling to it. If we haven't gotten it yet, the attachment is the attachment of yearning, of hoping one day, if I'm lucky, if I try hard enough, I'll get it, and we remain fixated there, right? Or if we do get it, said, oh good, now I've got it, and now we hold on for dear life. That person, that place, that job, that look, that physical quality, whatever it is, now I found what I wanted, now I have to hold on. That's attachment. All of that based on the premise that the sources of our happiness, the origins of our happiness are out there in this field that we can see in the world of objects. It's amazing how hope never fades. And the great tragedy here in the broader context of rebirth to rebirth is that when we're born, we don't remember all the stuff we learned last time. Otherwise, we would just be doing better and better every lifetime because we remember all the mistakes, all the dead ends that did not work out in the past life. But unfortunately, most of us are born with amnesia. And we make the same mistakes. We pursue the same dead ends again and again. And some people continue to pursue those dead ends right until they're dead. That's a long dead end. It's called life. And so here, one eliminates attachment. When you find an actual source of well-being, the Buddha said, peaceful, sublime, and ambrosial dwelling. You see, I'm finding that which I always sought. It's not nirvana, but this is happiness I was looking for. And I found it. I find that all I need to do is be able to sit and breathe. That's all the support I need. I don't need women or men, I don't need wealth, I don't need luxuries, I just would like to be not too cold, not too hot, not too hungry. Besides that, all I need is to breathe. And that's enough. And then you know, from your own experience, this joy, this satisfaction, this sense of well-being is better than anything I've experienced thus far. You name it. What money, wealth, or prestige? Money or power? I get three right. It's wealth and all that wealth can get, prestige, status, and all that that can get you, and power and all that that can get you. The three jewels of the mundane world. Wealth, power, and prestige. How many people in the world around us, and how often do we ourselves, when we think of the good life, pursue it by one of those three ways? You know? And you tap into this with no wealth, and no prestige, and no power over anybody else. Just a wealth of your own mind, the status, the prestige of having refined your mind, and the power to actually control your own mind. And you found that you find through your own experience that that's which you've always been looking for outside, you've now found in an inside, which means all of your attachment for anything outside is now gone. You say, but no, I've already found it. And it's not in that person or this job, or that. It's not there. It never was, and I've awakened to that. And so you overcome attachment. But also disappointment. And that is when we're gamblers really in samsara. And we're gambling, oh, if I marry this person, or if I have this number of children, or if I live there, I get this job, I look like this, I look like that, and so forth. That will make me happy. And then we either don't get it, in which case we're disappointed, or we do get it, and then it's only a matter of time. If we have our eyes open, then we get disappointed. No, she was going to make me happy, but she didn't. What a loser. You know. And then we're disappointed in her. Oh, then we get divorced. Maybe somebody else. Oh, I think she's going to do a better job. Or that car didn't do it. This car will do it. That job didn't do it. This job will do it. We keep on having this sense of a limited imagination. I call it imagination deficit disorder. You know, where you're disappointed when you don't get it, and then when you do get it, you're still disappointed. If you really look, did it deliver the goods or not? Did it give me the happiness I was seeking or not? You'll find not. And that's a big disappointment. It's a disappointment not to succeed, but it's even a bigger disappointment to succeed and find you still haven't succeeded in what you're really after. And so this simple practice, it's free. You don't have to pay anybody to breathe, right? And you can get instruction on mindfulness breathing. You don't have to pay for that either. It's free. But it can provide you with a sense of well-being that the richest people on the planet cannot afford. Because they don't know where to look for it. And so one overcomes attachment and disappointment towards the world by means of non-objectification. I like to linger here because it's so rich. By means of non-objectification. Here we are as sentient beings. And part of our modus operandi, part of our prime directive is, as sentient beings, we don't have any choice in this matter. We don't want to suffer. Doesn't matter you're religious, not religious, you're human, you're not human, none of us want to suffer. But then when we do suffer, we look around like a very retarded Sherlock Holmes and say, who done it? Who done it? I'm feeling pretty crappy. Who did it? Is it something I ate? Is it her? Is it this place? Is it this? We're looking around. Who did it? Who did it? And we're looking for an object to blame. And we're going to find one. It's a political party. It's the neighbors. It's your dog. It's your clothing. It's your health. It's something you can point a finger to. And they say, we have to move away from that. I can't stand her. I can't stand him. I can't stand this job. I can't live. I can't. And we're moving away from. And then we think, what will make me happy? And again, what will make me happy? And then we think some object comes to mind. Something comes to mind as an object of mind. And then we start moving towards it. That's objectification. Of thinking that the actual sources of our suffering are out there to be found and to be moved away from, or to be swelled, vanquished, subdued. That is out there, and the sources of our happiness are out there. And here you say, well, now I know. I'm not an arhat, I'm not liberated, but now I know. Nobody out there makes me suffer. They can certainly contribute, but they don't make me suffer. They don't have that power. And nobody out there makes me happy. They can certainly contribute, but nobody has that power. Only my mind. If I want to find the sources of my suffering and be actually authentic, true, get it right, the source of my suffering has always been inward, and the source of my happiness has always been inward. Therefore, non-objectification. That's common to all schools of Buddhism. But this takes place in the Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. So we have to see it in context. The perfection of wisdom is all about the emptiness of all phenomena. And what we as sentient beings do is we see all these appearances, and they all seem to be out there. The trees, the people, the land, the birds, and so forth. But they appear to be out there, just as in a dream. Everything seems to be really out there. You point, you say, yes, but he's over there. He's over there, she's over there. Over there, and they point the finger really over there, as if there's something really over there from its own side, and that's how things appear. Just as they do in a dream. It's called a dream. that we objectify the very existence of things, not only objectifying what we feel to be, we imagine to be the sources of our happiness and the sources of suffering, but even existence itself, that I'm really over here, and you're really over there, subject over here, object over there, my side over here, your side over there, and we take it very seriously. As if there's some real barrier between you and me. There's got to be some barrier here, which is your side and my side. What exactly is it here? Maybe it's here. Where exactly is this barrier? That we say that's here. Maybe it's here. At your toe? Where is it? And where do I start? Where do I end? If I have something I really cherish, imagine this is like some priceless, my precious, some priceless attachment that I value even more than my left arm, and I'm left-handed. Imagine this is some really cherished thing and I put it out there. Then I extend that far, right? If somebody snatches it away, I'm going to cut your hand off. That's mine. Now this, my cherished. So it can be 10 yards away. It can be 100 miles away. That's how far I am. That's how far mine is, because I'm identifying with it. This is crucial for my happiness. Of course, so that's a symbol. But it could be a wife, a husband, a child, money, prestige, status, the appreciation, recognition, acknowledgement of other people. I think that's where my happiness is. People admire me, therefore I'm happy. Where's the boundaries to that? And if somebody then threatens my reputation, that other people admire, respect, and so forth, then I have to do something about that, because they're threatening something mine, and I may care about it more than I do my own arm. And so one overcomes objectification, and he lives observing the body as the body. Every phrase here is so full of meaning. Because when we normally look into the mirror, do we see a body? Or do we look into the mirror and we smile or we grimace? I'm looking good today. I'm looking bad today. Oh, I'm looking older. Oh, I'm looking more wrinkly. Oh, I. You look at the wall, I'm seeing more liver spots. More liver spots. Oh, not having so much that. I. We don't look at the body as the body. We look at the body as I. Me. Are you a man or woman? How do you know? Look at your body. That'd be the dead giveaway. Look at your mind. I'm not so sure. Look into your mind quietly. Ignore your body. Is it quite clear what your gender is? Is it quite clear whether you're old or young? Whether you're rich or poor? High status, low status? Is that very clear? When you look into your mind. But you look at your body, you know immediately. Oh yeah, woman's body, men's body. That's who I am. I'm a man. I'm for women's rights. If I'm a woman, I'm for women's rights. We women have to stand up for ourselves. Too long. Or people of different color. Oh, I'm African American. I'm Asian. I'm this. I'm Indian. No more. We've had it with racist attitude by other people. I'm Indian. Or all the oppression of the Scots. Bruce Allen Wallace speaking. All the oppression the Scottish people have suffered at the hands of the English. I'm a Scottish. We have to stand up for pro libertate. That's the of the Wallace clan. We Scots, we have to stand up for ourselves. Who am I? I'm a Scot. I'm a Scot. How do you know? Look at my Scottish body. That'll tell you. So you're seeing the body as the body. We're waking up. You say, hey, well, the body is a body. It's not me. And there's nothing, not the skin, not the bone marrow, not even the DNA, has somehow quality of being mine. It's just DNA. It's unique, yeah, but so what? And the bone, the skin, the flesh, the hair, there's nothing here that's really mine. To a large extent, we could start swapping organs. Kidney, liver, heart, bone marrow, blood, plasma, and so forth. We could have a little game here, just how many parts can, and still say this is mine. So there's nothing that's mine and nothing that is I. And that's why looking at the body as the body is actually a wake-up call. We look at the body as the body, feelings as feelings, not my feelings, simply feelings as feelings, mental states as mental states, rather than I and mine, I and mine. So this is an enormously rich statement from the Prajnaparamita, Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Now, what is really core, central? Coming back to the central theme of the relationship between samadhi, or the practice of shamatha, the achievement of the jhanas, especially the first jhana, is that a major reason why the Buddha taught this and emphasized it so much in the Pali Canon and the Mahayana, and we find in the Vajrayana as well, is to overcome what are called the 5 obscurations, or often called the 5 hindrances, nivarana in Sanskrit, But the Tibetans take two terms, Nivarana and Avarana, and they translate them as one term, Dipa. And Dipa means to obscure. They obscure. So I'm going to go with the Tibetan interpretation. It's just a nuance. But rather than go for 5 hindrances, and they are 5 hindrances, obscurations I find a bit more clarifying. 5 obscurations that are overcome. They're not eradicated, but they are subdued into submission. 5 obscurations. And the first of these is, it's called in Tibetan, Döbe Yunan Lechakpa. It is attachment for the bounties or the attractions of the desire realm. And again, that's the world we know. What out there attracts you? 5 senses, for sure. Things to smell, to taste, to touch, and so forth, for sure. But also intangible things like the recognition, appreciation, status, power, wealth, sense of being an important person, a worthy person, an accomplished person, a remarkable person. All of these are bounties, the bounties of the desire realm. And the attachment to that is not simply enjoying them. Even arhats can enjoy a good meal, great bodhisattvas can enjoy a good meal, or the beauties of nature and so on. But it's the attachment to them, feeling, herein lies my happiness. This is where my happiness is. More appreciation, respect, love of other people, more power, more status, what have you. And so that's one of the 5 obscurations, called simply, for short, sensual desire. But you see, it's more than that. It's more than simply just liking good food and so on. That's one. The second one is ill will. Ill will, enmity, malice. And this is actually an intention to give harm. An intention, a wish, and an aspiration, an intention others may suffer. Ill will. Out of resentment, or they've done something bad, we want to get back at them. That's the second one. A third one is laxity and dullness. We know all about that. The laxity is simply a loss of clarity. The dullness is more of the same, but it's getting really muddy and turgid. We know what it's like. That's the third one. The fourth one is a very interesting combo, because 2 of these are combos. It's laxity and dullness. Well, that's a matter of gradation. But the next one is called in Tibetan Göpa and Göpa. And Göpa is the agitation, the excitation. Right? But Göpa has a dual, from the Sanskrit and the Tibetan, has a dual ambience to it. One is remorse, guilt, afflictive sense of guilt. It could be translated now as low self-esteem, lack of self-worth, feeling I'm really not a good person, I'm kind of a cruddy person, like that. But the other aspect of that is anxiety. In the Sanskrit, it has a dual connotation. It's guilt, it's anxiety, and it's agitation, excitation. So that's the fourth one. And the fifth one is, of these 5 obscurations, is afflictive doubt or uncertainty, where we can't commit ourselves wholeheartedly to, let's say, meditative practice, spiritual practice in general. There's always that nagging doubt, that little skepticism, that one that pulls us back. Maybe, maybe not, maybe who knows, who after all, who really knows, and we just waffling. So it's not certain, that's fine. But being afflictive uncertainty, where it doesn't let us out, those are the 5 obscurations. And so the practice of shamatha, the achievement of the first jhana, is specifically designed to subdue, not to eradicate completely, it's not enough, but to subdue, almost like you make them go dormant, almost like you sent them into hibernation. So they're still there, but they're not bugging you, they're not obscuring. And what are they obscuring? What are they obscuring? We all know what all these are like. Who has not experienced the sensual craving, animosity, and so forth? Who's not experienced that? But this whole business that there is obscuring something. Dipa means to obscure, to veil. And this is an interpretation that I feel very confident it's on the right track. And that is that peacefulness, that ambrosial dwelling, that sublime state that is our own birthright. It is our natural heritage. It is the quality of awareness when it's in a state of balance. Or if we shift the terminology slightly, when you achieve shamatha, you know the 3 qualities. A sense of bliss that is not dependent on stimulation. A sense of clarity, of luminosity, bright and clear. Again, not stimulus-driven. A sense of inner silence, of non-conceptuality, a profound serenity that again is not contingent upon some serene stimulation like pleasant, calm music and so on. These are our heritage. This is our birthright. This is what is already there when we unobscure the mind. These factors are natural inner resources. Hence they're called obscurations. Well, in the practice of shamatha, as you move towards and eventually achieve the first jhana, naturally, says, arise 5 jhana, 5 factors of meditative stabilization, and they're coming naturally. I like to think of them, they're like natural antibodies, that through such training they naturally emerge, and lo and behold, these 5 jhana factors serve one by one as natural antidotes, direct antidotes for each of the 5 obscurations. So we bring the 5 obscurations wherever we're going, but we're also bringing, they're in a nascent state, quiet state, dormant state, all of the 5 jhana factors. And these are unveiled, these emerge, they grow, they come into their strength through the practice of shamatha and the achievement of the first jhana. And so these five, well, the first of these is single-pointed attention. It's very simple. We've all experienced it. We've all experienced it. There's nothing very esoteric or very transcendent about this. We all know what it's like, at least briefly, for the mind to be really collected, unified, focused, on the mark, on the target. Maybe only for 5 seconds, but at least we know what it's like. We know it's not beyond our scope. That's the first one. Single-pointed attention, unification. That's the first one. The second is the quality of called sukha, and it's a sense of well-being. It's a very nice and very close translation. It's not necessarily blissful, but we all know what it's like. It has a nice resonance. I think it translates well too, doesn't it? To Spanish, to Portuguese, and so on, into German. I think you'll find a sense of well-being, that it's not all jazzed up and excited and juiced up, but it's kind of like, how are you? I'm truly well. I really feel well. That quality from the inside out, a quality of well-being of the mind. It's called sukha. But there's more. There's the third one. And that is, well, we'll go here. The next one is course examination. You remember that was one the Buddha referred to when he was a youngster and he achieved the first jhana. Course investigation, where we attend to something and we kind of take it in. Our first shot, our first take. What's it like? What's the color of Andreas' shirt? I look, I got it. I'm not analyzing the texture, the weave, is it a synthetic, is it a cotton, but I look at the shirt, no, it's cloth and it's white. So it's that first take. It's, one of the great commentators said, it's like striking a bell, and the initial striking of the bell, that first sound of the bell. I've struck. It's a course investigation, I've got it, okay, I'm on target, and I'm getting something. Called applied thought, it's called course investigation. So there's the third jhana factor. And then the fourth one is the more subtle investigation. So if we take the example of the Andreas' shirt, but now how many buttons does it have? Is it short sleeve or long sleeve? Is it a synthetic or is it cotton? Is it a mixture? What's the cut? Is that an expensive shirt or is it a cheap shirt? Is it very warm? So one starts posing questions and investigating more closely. Maybe I want a shirt like that, maybe I don't. And so investigate. This is called sustained thought, or again the analogy is like once you've struck the bell, the reverberation of the bell. It continues and continues. So it catches two qualities of this. On the one hand called sustained thought, on the other hand it's the same term is translated as course investigation. It's called applied thought or subtle investigation, analysis, okay? I see that's going to be crucial. Those two qualities, those two faculties of mind can be absolutely crucial for Vipassana. Vipassana is far, far more than bare attention. Bare attention is a very modern notion. And so that's the third one. And then but again, in this list, there's bliss. It's called priti in Sanskrit, or piti in Pali. It's bliss. Now this is bliss. This is feeling really, really good. This is pleasure. This is delight. This is bliss, ecstasy. It's got a real sharp edge to it. And interestingly, it's not because you're attending to some blissful or very pleasant sensation or stimulation. It's coming right out of the nature of the mind. It's your birthright. But it's obscured. Well, now we know who. It's not this person or that job or this or that. It's the 5 obscurations. Why aren't we blissful? Why are we not abiding in bliss and an ongoing sense of well-being? It's not the environment. It's not this and that. Not. It's the mind internally having its own heritage, its own natural resources being obscured by these 5 obscurations. Now the 5th one here is this subtle investigation. Subtle investigation. So there's a sequence to that. Now, the beauty of this, it turns out, purely empirical, there's no religion or philosophy here, that each of these 5 turns out to serve as an antidote to each of the 5 obscurations. And it's interesting, so it's worth spending a few minutes on it. The first one, again, we know what bliss is like. Maybe it's from food or some other sense. We know what bliss is like. We know what sense of well-being is like. We know how to coarsely investigate and analyze. We know what it's like. to be at least temporarily single-pointed. So none of these are alien, and the 5 obscurations are not alien. We don't have to imagine it, we just remember it. What's it like? Then these 5 jhana factors come into their strength. And when they come into their strength, as the Buddha said, through cultivating and developing the shamatha practice, mindfulness of breathing or some other technique, it turns out that the single-pointed attention, this real sharpness, this sharp focus of attention turns out to serve as a natural antibody or natural antidote for sensual craving. That's not intuitively obvious. It's not intuitively obvious, but you practice shamatha for a while and get into the zone. Get into the flow, where not just for 5 seconds, but for 30 seconds, a minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, you're in that flow of just a flow of single-pointedness. While you're in it, see whether you're wishing for sex or food or nice music or people to respect you more or more power or more money. It's not there. It's a natural antidote, a natural antibody. So that's kind of cool. There are all types of discursive meditations that are designed to help us overcome our craving for wealth and prestige and all of that kind of stuff. But just start developing that jhana factor, unveiling, nurturing, cultivating that jhana factor, and that will actually get you out of that whole network of thinking, that will make me happy, that will make me happy. It's a natural antibody. Okay? The second one is a sense of well-being. Again, we know what it's like, so no commentary needed. We know what it's like. But what about when you cultivate it and sustain it, and it's not driven by stimulus? We can have pleasant music, a really nice place to stay, maybe a beautiful car, gives us a sense, whoa, I feel really good now. This is a nice jacuzzi, this is a nice massage, and then this is really nice. But this is not stimulus driven. In other words, it can't be drawing a stimulation. So when you're able to cultivate and sustain well-being, this is genuine well-being, that's arising from a mind in a state of balance rather than simply encountering nice stimulation, what does that serve? How does that serve in terms of the 5 obscurations? Malice, enmity, ill will. Now, again, just draw from your own experience. We don't need a whole lot of imagination here. When you're abiding in a sense of well-being from the inside, we all know what it tastes like. At that time, are you recalling people who have done you bad? Injustices here, etc., etc. Are you recalling that, and do you have a sense of resentment and ill will and wanting to retaliate while you're experiencing a sense of well-being that's coming from within? The answer is no. And why would you want to step out of your well-being to go into that garbage pit of thinking, oh, she said that, and he did this, and he stole from me, and he abused me, and why would you want to go into that cesspool if you're abiding in a sense of well-being? Nobody in his right mind would do that, which means it's a natural antibody. You're not going to go there. And when you see the mind veering off, you say, I don't think so. You're going to bring it back that in an instant. In an instant, it will quell and dispel the tendency to go off into resentment, grudge holding, hatred, malice, and so on. So why on earth would I go there? It's like eating dirt, eating filth. Natural antibody. We have the third one, and this is course examination. You know what it's like? Course investigate, course examination. For what does it serve as a natural antibody? Laxity and dullness. When the mind's getting dull, it's getting spaced out, it's getting lethargic, just loss of clarity. That's laxity, loss of clarity. If we strike the bell again, strike the bell, come back to your meditative object, strike it, attend to it, engage with it, sharpen it, hey, wake up, look. In that moment, the laxity and dullness are gone. Just look, engage. It's like, shake hand. Gotcha. Good to meet you. Glad to meet you. In that moment, I'm engaged. In that moment, I'm not going, oh. Laxity and dullness are gone. It's simple. That was not something difficult or sophisticated or advanced. Engage. Laxity and dullness are gone. It's a natural antidote. Then we have the next one is a very interesting one. It's the one that is least intuitive, least obvious to my mind. Bliss. This is the priti or piti in Pali, the bliss. For what does that serve as a natural antibody? And you'll get it pretty quickly by a process of elimination. But that for which it serves as an antidote is that excitation and anxiety-guilt. Now, the term excitation in the Sanskrit and the Tibetan, the Pali, The very definition of it is a type of agitation that's driven by desire. We're sitting quietly, but we can't sit quietly because the mind's making up a story. Oh, if I could have a nice cup of hot tea right now. If I could go jogging, if I could have a massage, maybe a little bit of internet, just a small dose. Something. Why? Because we're looking for something we don't have. We're looking for that entertainment, that arousal, that stimulation. Give me my fix. We're addicted. We are addicted. Whereas if you're already experiencing bliss, why would you be distracted? The distraction would be to find bliss, but you've already found it. Why would we be dwelling on guilt, on afflictive remorse and so forth, maybe low self-esteem, if you're experiencing bliss? Like, why would I go there? It's a natural antibody. So the bliss arises and it just takes care of those. You're not going to go there. You found what you're looking for in the first place. You always wanted bliss, now you've got it. And you don't need to keep on stimulating yourself. It's coming right out like an artesian well. It just keeps on flowing and flowing when you develop and cultivate your samadhi. And the final one is precise investigation. Right? Now we know what that's like. Take an example of Andreas' shirt again. Now if you've been memorizing this as I've been going, you know there's only one obscuration left, and that's afflictive, waffling, the nagging, I'm not quite sure, maybe not, maybe not. You know, it can creep into every activity. Shall I? Maybe I can, maybe I can't, like that. Well, let's take the example of, is it possible, this is a big example, is it possible in this modern era, 2015, the world in many ways is very degenerate. What can we say? There it is. Is it culture, right? We're not immune to it. We're part of this modernity. We're participants. Is it possible for people like us, whether we're from India or Tibet, Mongolia, any continent, is it possible for people like us, exactly like us right here, is it possible for people like us to achieve, let's say, the first jhana? Is it possible? Or is that only in earlier times when the Dharma is not so degenerated, society not so degenerate, it was more peaceful, more serene, more sane. It was only the good old days. Maybe Tibet 500 years ago or India 1500 years ago. Is it possible for people like us who have been brought up and profoundly conditioned by modernity? Is that possible or is it not? It's a good question, isn't it? It's not obvious that many people living in modernity have achieved the first jhana. If they have, they're keeping a pretty good secret. So is that because it's impossible? If it's possible, then where are they? Where are they? If it's not possible, then why doesn't somebody just say so? Why does the Dalai Lama go around, especially now for the last several years, really encouraging people, monks and nuns in the south of India, lay people and monks in Australia and in Estonia, in DC, and all over the place, and recently, really encouraging people, hey, speaking monks, nuns, and geshes, khenpos, and so forth, saying, you've been overlooking something. You should practice shamatha, you achieve shamatha. Those who really should achieve shamatha, we're overlooking this. That was a mistake. And he's extremely knowledgeable. And if it were impossible, that would be unkind. Eugene is she right? Well, the gold medal, 500 meter. You should train for that. That'd be really, that's within reach. It's probably not in. It would have always been a goal for me. I know my body. Not only the Dalai Lama, it's the Lama Zopa Rinpoche now, going all over the world, emphasizing this. There are other lamas as well. But it's not just lamas, it's the Buddha. saying you're overlooking something, you're overlooking something. Well, frankly, I just don't think they would be encouraging us to achieve it if it were flat out impossible, because we are born in the tree. Reason? And age here, oh, you could achieve this in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s if the mind is clear. In some ways, I know some of the younger people must say, Alan, you're not approaching it, you reached it. As long as the mind is clear, there's nothing out of reach. There, but if you're feeling uncertain, bodhicitta, could I develop loving kindness, immeasurable loving kindness? Could I reach the path? Could I but deal with skepticism, going around in circles? Let's check. Is there any reason a person like myself could not achieve shamatha, achieve the citta, gain realization of emptiness? Any reason? Well, that's core, and then do I have teachers? Do I have good companions? Can I find a good environment? Can the cause and conditions people come together? Can, yes or no, investigate carefully. And we achieve or not. Well, we don't do it. You're just, yes, I can, like a mantra. Investigate. Then you see, all right, that I could achieve, let's say, shamatha, the marga, the first path. Effective here. Every moment. I can't. As I'm pointed devoting virtue to out. Gone. Right way. This is the right path. If I never live a nice long lifetime, who knows? I won't put a number limit on what I might realize in this lifetime. I don't know. If uncertainty is gone. So now we find in the commentary the foundation likens the mind when it's distilled, the mind when it's cultivated, when it's abiding in a state of bliss, luminosity, and non-conceptuality. He likens this to a pool of transparent, crystal clear, sparkling clear water.
I need to replace this.
Sure, we'll take no, it's good time.
Okay.
We break.
You can take water.
Don't need. Ready to go? Good. That's a nice break. So the issue of the metaphor, the analogy, that mind when it's no longer obscured, when it's transparent, clear, sparkling, radiant. The Buddha called it in Pali, Pabhasacitta, the brightly shining mind. The brightly shining mind. What's obscuring it? Well, the Buddha draws this analogy to a crystal clear pool of water, and he says, in this regard, now we follow this analogy and relate to it the 5 obscurations. Sensual craving, you know what that is now, it's more than just sensual craving, is like water mixed with various colors. What you really want to see is that crystal clear, transparent, sparkling clear water, right? But if you throw a handful of red dye into it, what do you see? The red dye. And so the red dye obscures the nature of the water there. The water's still water. Water's still clear and pure, but it's obscured by the coloration. When we're fixated on a person, a status, objects, possessions, and so forth, that's going to make me happy, that's going to make me happy, or that makes me unhappy, that makes me unhappy. That crystal clear transparency, the natural bliss and luminosity of awareness is obscured. We're riveted on, fixated on the object of the desire. It obscures. Then we have malice. That's like boiling water. You all looked into a pot of boiling water. All you see is all the bubbles, all the steam, all the froth coming up. You can't see the water in its natural, clear, luminous state, crystal clear state. We have laxity and dullness. These are like water covered over by moss. Nice clear analogy, no explanation needed. Then excitation and anxiety are like water agitated by the wind. When you look into the water, all you see is the wave, the surface. So you're sitting quietly, wanting to mindfulness of breathing, is churning on and on with vikalpa, with this ongoing flow of obsessive, compulsive thinking. And you're trying to just still the mind, and all you're seeing is the surface, the noise, the chit-chat, the memories, the emotions, the desires, the longings, frustrations, and so on. You can't see your mind. You can't see the clarity, the stillness, the transparency of your own awareness, because you're getting all the background noise. But the background noise is foreground noise. And then finally, uncertainty, this afflictive uncertainty, is like turbid, muddy water. And that's pretty clear. Needs no commentary. So the Buddha said, now, he was famous for making great analogies, and here's another one. He said, so long as these 5 obscurations are not abandoned, as long as you're not free, as long as they're not dormant, as long as they're still active, one considers oneself, did we just lose? One considers oneself, we've lost something. One considers oneself, oh, I can't bend down, okay? One considers oneself as indebted. So imagine this now. Imagine being in debt. And this is not a debt where you're just paying off a mortgage but have plenty of income coming in. Imagine having debt where you have no idea how to pay it off. Imagine your mind state when you have a burden of debt and you haven't a clue how you ever get out of that debt. Not a very happy day. Imagine oneself as indebted, but now imagine on top of being in unbearable debt that you cannot meet, you're also sick. That's gotten kind of bad, right? You're in bonds. Oh, now you're in handcuffs and leg irons. So now you're in debt, and you're sick, and you're in bonds, and you're enslaved. Uh-oh, now you're a slave. That's not an... Or you're also lost in a desert track. Now put that all together. You're out in the middle of the Gobi. You don't know where to go. You don't know where to go. But by the way, you do notice that you're somebody else's slave, and you're in bondage, and you're sick, and you're in debt. In other words, you're not a happy camper. You would say, boy, this is really tough. And from the Buddha's perspective, that's us. That's us. From his perspective, from the perspective of a person who has achieved the first jhana and is free of those 5 obscurations, they're looking upon us right now, relatively affluent, relatively good health, all of the nice things we have, and tears are flowing down their eyes. Oh, you're indebted, you're sick, you're in bondage, you're enslaved, and you're lost in the desert track. Oh, so sad. So the whole notion of sanity is clearly very relative. And he's saying, really, you're not sane. You're satisfied too easily. If you're satisfied, if you're content, I think we are losing. I think a battery must be going.
There's some disturbance.
Aha.
Yes.
Disturbance in the field.
Yes.
Oh, not too close. Not too close. Or I can simply try, no, it's good. Okay. But we can even take it a step further. I'm not sure if this is true, but it really strikes me as true. He just gave 5 analogies in debt, etc. He gave 5. Now, the Buddha never spoke casually, like just out of whimsy. He just gave 5. And there are 5 obscurations. And there's an order to them. And the first one is sensual craving. And that's like being in debt. Isn't it true? You're craving for something, you haven't gotten it yet. Then you're in debt. But I can't let go, I can't let go. Or I've gotten it and I need to hold on. It owns me now. Your house, your status, your privilege, your wealth, your power, and so forth. If that's what you're fixating on, it owns you now. So you're in debt. You're not free. People who have identified their success, even their worth. Are you a successful person? Are you a person of worth or not? And a lot of people will say, yeah, it is. Look how much money I've earned. Look at how much I'm respected. Look how many people I have who obey my orders. You bet I'm successful. I'm definitely a person of worth. I've really accomplished something. Look, these 100 people, they're my employees. I tell them jump, they say how far. Look at all the money I've amassed. Look at my prestige, my status. I'm really something. I'm really something. Which means if I lose these things, then I'm nothing. Which means I'm indebted. Right? And then now, ill will. We know among the obscurations, which one, frankly, which one feels the worst? Which one just like a spike in the eyeball is ill will. It's terrible, isn't it? When you really, the mind is grinding away with malice, with resentment, with grudge, with wanting to retaliate, wanting somebody else to suffer, it feels just awful. You're sick. I mean, really, you are sick. If you're looking upon another sentient being and wanting, may this person suffer, you're sick. No healthy person would ever do that. If they're a criminal, maybe you want to contain them so they can't harm people. That's fine. But wanting them to suffer? That would be like being a physician in a mental ward and seeing some psychotic people, criminally psychotic people. And the physician turning to that person and saying, I want you to suffer. I'm going to give you some electric shock therapy that will serve you right. Then you say, then you're fired. If you want to punish these 6 people because they're unpleasant, maybe even they're criminally insane, and you want to simply punish them, you're fired, wouldn't you? If you're a doctor, you say, hey, you're finished. You're in the wrong profession. You should be a thug. You should be a criminal. That's what they want to do. But if you're a doctor, ever, never, ever, ever, do you want your patient to suffer? Maybe you even have to give an operation. Maybe you have to incarcerate. Maybe they're harmful to other people, harmful to themselves. Okay, but you're never doing it for them to suffer. So if you want someone else to suffer, you're sick. You're sick. We are sick. And so that's pretty close. The next one is this laxity and dullness, you remember? That's in bonds. When your mind is dull, it's lost its clarity, and lethargic, heavy, muddy, what's it good for? And what's your body good for if you're in leg irons and in handcuffs? What are you good for? What can you probably can't even cook, especially if your hands are behind your back. What exactly can you do? You're in bondage. A dull mind is a mind that sets you in bondage. It's kind of good for anything, right? And then we have the fourth one, and that is enslaved. Oh, we know what this is like. It's so good, but we all know this. What's it like when your mind is just caught up in one obsessive thought after another, agitated, anxious, feeling guilty, low self-esteem, and it's just this chain of getting mugged by our own thoughts. That's enslaved. That's not freedom. So later on when we're in sadhana, they'll speak about free will. It's perfectly obvious we don't have free will if we don't even have the freedom to get our mind to be quiet. Where's our freedom? When we can't even tell the mind, you can be quiet now, I have other things to do. If it doesn't become quiet, then that's not freedom. That's enslavement. We're enslaved by our own minds. But we're enslaved by this obscuration in particular. And then finally, lost in a desert track. You're out in the middle of a vast desert, and you don't know where the nearest oasis is. You don't know where camp is. You don't know where civilization is. You don't know where food or water is. You're clueless, and you want to set off in this direction, but then I know maybe it's this direction. But maybe it's that, and maybe I should go back. But then I'm not. Oh, where are my tracks? The wind took them away. All you have is uncertainty. You're lost in a desert track. Afflictive uncertainty. You can't move in any direction with confidence because you don't know where the hell you're going. That's pretty pathetic. So this is the Buddha's own words. These are the 5 obscurations. So I'm presenting this in a way that I'm hoping, aspiring, that you find more and more these 5 obscurations are unbearable. In our society, to be normal. Completely normal. You're mentally healthy if you have all 5. It's fine. Because we set the bar so low. If we can function in society, we can be productive members of society and not act in such an odd way that we call attention to ourselves. We get a stamp on the forehead, you're okay. You're sane enough. We put the bar down, the bar of sanity down by our toenails. It's so low. We have set our sights so low. And I feel materialism is largely at the root of that. Our expectations, our aspirations, our vision of what our potential is so low. Thanks to materialism. That's one of the great burdens, obscurations to abandon. I give a little bit more. The Buddha stated here now, in summary, and it should come as no surprise, the Buddha said the mind established in equilibrium comes to know reality as it is. And that is insofar as the mind is still subject to, dominated by, any one or all of these 5 obscurations. Take that mind that's still putting hope in sensual desires to provide happiness, still prone to enmity, to laxity, to excitation, to uncertainty. That mind, what chance do you think, if you're a betting person, what chance do you think that mind has of coming to know reality? The mind is completely screwed up. To say neurotic would be praise. This is really a screwed up mind. So the idea would be, why don't you become sane first? To know reality as it is a really good idea, but how do you think you're going to do it with that mind? That mind is totally screwed up. The Buddha just said, you're indebted, you're sick, you're in bondage, you're enslaved, and you're lost in a desert track, and meantime you're going to discover reality? Lots of luck with that, Establish an equilibrium. Well, the equilibrium is freedom from those 5 obscurations. Now nowadays, so that's kind of the core of what I wanted to share with you. But this morning I was up at 3:40. There's more. So I went back to the suttas, to some wonderful commentaries, and there were some really choice picking that it's too good to not share. And so, we are getting late, but we'll stop time. And so, nowadays, Vipassana centers everywhere. I've lived in Sri Lanka, centers all over the place. I've lived in Thailand for close to 2 years now. Vipassana centers everywhere, in Burma, everywhere. And then you go to India, find Vipassana centers, Goenka centers, Mahasi Sayadaw centers, all over the planet now. And so from Sao Paulo to Rio de Janeiro to Mexico, everywhere. Vipassana centers everywhere. That's really good. What about shamatha? Compared to the number of Vipassana centers, how many shamatha centers are there? Hardly any at all. Well, the Buddha addressed this. Why don't we say in the movie business, I'm not in the movie business, but cut to the chase. Go to the climax. What's this? The root of samsara, cutting mental afflictions from their source, and there's only one thing that will do that. That's vipassana, not shamatha. Shamatha won't cut one single mental affliction from its root. They'll always come back. They're like weeds. You're just pulling off the top. So it looks like it's not there, but it's still there, right? And so we have vipassana centers all over the place. And then we go to Tibetan Buddhism. How much emphasis on Vajrayana, and Mahamudra, and Dzogchen, and Vipassana, and middle way view, teachings on emptiness. Very cool, very good. How many people really emphasizing shamatha? Likewise, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism. How many really emphasizing shamatha? Maybe that's because it's not important. Maybe so. But the Buddha did address this, and he gave again a parable. I love the parable. And the parable is this story. There was once a king, and he had a son. Had some major character defects. He was immature. But nevertheless, the son, the king, the doting father, sent his son off to become the governor of one of his outlying regions, perhaps hoping that this would give him some maturity, take some responsibility, start really taking on the role of being a prince. And so the king made a bet. Said, well, let's give him some responsibility, hope it turns out well. Well, unfortunately, it didn't. So his son, the prince, is out in this outlying region, and he's turning out to be a total jerk. Instead of using his position of power, of influence, of prestige, of status, to really serve the population, which is what government really should always be about. Whether it's a dictatorship, whether it's communist, whether it's capitalist, democracy, or a king, government is to take care of the people. I mean, isn't it kind of a simple idea? But the prince wasn't. He was just using that for his own gratification. Partying, drinking, sex, just goofing off, exploiting the people for his own sake. And of course, and he's not very bright. I guess he thought his father would never find out? Well, the father's a king. Of course he finds out. So he calls in his first minister, his prime minister, and he says, okay, I want you to go out. You're my minister. You're my chief ambassador here. I want you to go out to that outlying kingdom and tell my son, hey, this is enough. This is totally unacceptable. Tell him to shape up. So you go tell him. Totally unacceptable. And the minister was a very wise minister, and he says, oh king, I'm sorry, but I will not. If you send me by myself, I'll go there, and I'm not even aristocracy. I'm not royal. I'm just a minister. And this man's royalty is the crown prince. He's going to take one look at me and my scolding him, and he's going to put me into prison, or maybe cut off my head. So no, I won't go. I'm sorry, but I won't go. I will not succeed, therefore I will not go. I'll go only if you give me bodyguard. You give me some troops, some of your choice tough guys, warriors. You give me some protection. Then I will go accost your son and tell him to shape up, but not without a bodyguard. And the king said, well, you're right. So he gave him bodyguard, including the major tough guy, great warrior. And so the minister, with his soldiers, with his troops, for his own protection. And they come into the prince's domain, into his palace there. And his principal bodyguard comes, he just marches right up to the prince. He takes him by the hair, slams his head down on the ground, and holds a sword over his head. He said, Prince, the minister has something to tell you, listen up. The prince does. This guy means business. And then, the prince now having been subdued, which means the mental afflictions of his mind having been subdued, then the minister comes to him and tells him, okay, your behavior is acceptable, and he passes on the message of the king. But he couldn't do it by himself. If he'd gone by himself, the prince with his mental afflictions would have conquered the minister rather than the minister bringing the prince onto the wise path. All right? The minister, the wise minister, is Vipassana. And the bodyguard is shamatha. The shamatha comes in and it subdues your five obscurations. They hibernate. They're not gone, but they're not active. Which means you're seeing into the clear purity, the transparency, the luminosity of your brightly shining mind. With the factors of investigation, of analysis, you're ready to practice Vipassana, cultivate bodhicitta, the four immeasurables, you're ready to go. But if you bring in Vipassana all by itself, without the shamatha, you're bringing with it all of the five obscurations. You're bringing your wimpy little Vipassana into a head-on collision with your five obscurations. Who's going to win that battle? Bye-bye Vipassana. It may get some benefit, but it's going to be overwhelmed. It will not have staying power. It will not have staying power without the shamatha. So the Buddha's great innovation to India, the contemplative culture of India at that time, was not samadhi by itself. It had already been developed. And there were great philosophers. And there were a myriad of philosophers, a lot of very intelligent people, and they had a myriad of philosophies. Theistic, non-theistic, personal God, impersonal God, monotheism, polytheism. There were agnostics and there were materialists. It was a very pluralistic society. A lot of very bright people thinking very bright thoughts and agreeing on nothing, just like modern philosophy today. A lot of very bright people thinking very bright thoughts and agreeing on nothing. Right? Philosophy by itself is philosophy. A lot of insight, but no staying power. And so they had philosophy, they had something like Vipassana. They had samadhi, but divorced from the Vipassana. And the Buddha, having seen, could that be the way to enlightenment? Yes, it is. Then he saw, that's it. Not samadhi as an end in itself. Peace, serenity, abstraction, withdrawal from reality, but as a tool to give muscle to your Vipassana. So the Vipassana comes in and does its work, and it has this to cut those mental afflictions from their root and bring about irreversible results. That's marga. That's path. Irreversible change. Not just having a good day and a bad day. Being really, really compassionate one day and really stinker the next day. Irreversible change. That's marga. And it comes only through the union of shamatha vipassana. And so, The Buddha states in the Anguttara Nikaya, he says, without abandoning the 5 obscurations, it is not possible to know one's own welfare. The welfare of others, or the welfare of both oneself and others. It's not possible to realize the excellence of knowledge and vision befitting noble ones transcending the human state. As long as your mind is still subject to 5 obscurations, you cannot reach the path. You cannot fully realize your own well-being, the well-being of others, or both. They have to be subdued. And shamatha, the practice of samadhi, is the method for doing so. In the Upanisa Suttas, it's stated, the Buddha states, samadhi is the sufficing condition of knowledge and vision of things as they are. If you'd like to have the insight, the irreversible transformation that takes place through insight, samadhi is the necessary condition. It doesn't have the vipassana, does not have the staying power. The wisdom doesn't have the staying power without the muscle, the backbone, that stability and clarity provided by samadhi, by shamatha, by jhana. And moreover, he said, and this is very interesting, the sufficing condition of samadhi, so we need samadhi for wisdom. But for samadhi, what's the sufficing condition? It's sukha. It's a sense of well-being. If you don't have the well-being, and you're practicing shamatha, your mind will continue to be restless. It'll keep on giving more distracting thoughts, more restlessness, more agitation, more, I need a better meditation set, I need a better cushion, I need a better technique, I need a new teacher, I need a new method, I need something I don't have. You know? Whereas when you're finding sukha arising from your practice, now you have a basis, now you're content, now you can continue without the mind going off on its myriad tours, its wanderings. And a final point, and then we'll stop. This is from the Bojjhanga Samyutta Sutta. When there was a group of non-Buddhist wanderers, ascetics, truth seekers, and they came to the Buddha, each with their own tradition, and that includes samadhi traditions. And they asked the Buddha, what's the difference between your teaching and that of all those who've gone before you, including those who teach samadhi? What's the difference? What's distinctive about your approach, your method, your path? What's distinctive? And what's remarkable here is the Buddha did not say the 4 Noble Truths. He could have, that would have been a good answer. He did not say the 12 links of dependent origination. He did not say the teachings on emptiness. He did not say. What he did say to these wanderers is that the difference, the salient difference between their teachings and the Buddha's was that these non-Buddhist ascetics, these wanderers, they did not fully understand the nature, the significance, the scope of samadhi. Whereas he said the Buddha, what the Buddha first comprehended in this historical era, what the Buddha was the first one to comprehend, innovative, revolutionary, was the strengths and the limitations of samadhi. They knew the strengths. Those 2 great samadhi teachers that he first trained with, they knew the strengths, but they didn't know the limitations, because they thought that was it, that was moksha. They knew the strength, but they didn't see the limitations, right? And then there are others who don't even see its strengths. They think, no, it's through ritual, it's through belief, it's through devotion, it's through chanting, it's through doing just physical exercises, it's through doing good works, it's through doing something else. It's through grace, it's through belief, it's through obedience. We have many, many answers from the world's religions and other answers from outside of religion, except for samadhi. In our civilization, samadhi doesn't count. No training for it, it really doesn't count. You know? Well, we don't see its strengths, we don't see the role of samadhi with its 5 dhyana factors, the ability to overcome the 5 obscuration. We don't see its role to support vipassana, to support bodhicitta, and so on. But the Buddha said he saw for the first time what are the strengths of samadhi, but what also the limitations. How must it be augmented, but in what ways is it also indispensable? So in that way, samadhi is necessary but not sufficient for achieving enlightenment. It's very tempting, it's a very great trap. Because if you achieve samadhi alone, and this has happened myriad of times, before the Buddha's time and after his time, myriad of times this happened. People achieve the bliss, the serenity, the joy, the sense of well-being that arise from samadhi. And they say, this is what I wanted, I have arrived. I must be enlightened. No, happened many times, it happens to this day. They see the strengths, but they don't see the limitations. So this is the seductiveness of samadhi, that you enter into the state of bliss, the sense of well-being, the serenity, the clarity, the luminosity, and you're satisfied. You say, this is what I wanted, I'm happy. Everything I wanted, I'm already happy, I'm set. Don't bug me now, I just want to hang out in samadhi. I've achieved samatha, now I don't care about all the other stuff. Just let me alone. I'm happy. That's the big trap. That you'll get there and not move. Not use it. Not see its limitation. You have not eradicated one mental affliction. Or as one great 19th century master said, you have not moved one hair's breadth on the path to liberation, to enlightenment. You're not even on the path yet. But if you don't get there, you won't get to the path. So that's the balance, that's nuance. Indispensable. Widely overlooked even by Buddhists in the modern world, let alone the secular world. They don't see it. Invisible. They don't see the strengths. But for those who do venture into it, it's very easy not to see the limitations. But the Buddha saw with unprecedented clarity the strengths and the limitations. And so that is the nature of samadhi and enlightenment. And we take a break. So fortunate to be able to share the Dharma in such a place. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, could we give kata right now?
Sure.
Okay.